Hey guys,
Hey,
where do you find a down and out octopus?
where?
On Squid Row.
Oh!
Hey guys,
Hey,
what did the squid say in its birthday?
what did it say on its birthday?
This is going to be incredible.
Holy shit!
Oh, I got more. I got one more here. Why did the squid have to pay $1 million ransom?
Why did the squid have to pay $1 million ransom?
His wife was squid napped.
Oh man!
Is she also a squid?
Oh, they're all squids.
Oh.
And we're all squids. We're the boob tube squid
It's
boys.
like that Moby song. We're all made of squids.
And we are back with more.
Moby? What the fuck kind of reference is Moby in 2021?
More Squid
two.
Game content, as you can tell. We won't stop talking about
Next, we're
squids
going to
here.
talk about Fat Boy Slim. I'm thinking of every popular electronic thing from the late '90s.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. I like that one. So I'm Spencer Hendricks. I'm hosting. Brian Vaughn, he likes squids quite a bit, right?
Mm-hmm. I like to chomp on them. I like to play with them. Whatever you can do with a squid.
I like to chomp 'em. I like to squid 'em.
Van has devolved into the Billy Gunn theme song, and I'm going to be honest, when I started off my sentence with I like to, and then my next sentence the same way, I thought of the same thing.
Good.
Well, that's fair. I don't see anything wrong with that. That's Van Lee, by the way. He's also here. We're all here to
We're all
discuss-
squid fans.
to discuss the second episode of Squid Game called Hell, which is where everybody wonders if the regular world is that much worse than Squid Game universe. We kind of need to figure out here how we stand on each of these characters, since we, as far as the non-paying listeners go, we're not going to be discussing the characters any more in depth in this, so we're going to have to decide what we make of them. We will not be at Squid Game Palace today. We're just going to be discussing how these people live in their normal lives and how shitty it is and whether or not they desire to return to it.
I thought this was interesting because I assumed once we made it to Squid Game Coliseum, as you
You
said,
stay.
that's it. You're going to be there. But we see that early on they take a vote, they leave. That's no secret. And we get to see how shitty their lives are.
Yeah.
Some more.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a cool episode.
It is. It's the only one that does not involve them basing everything at the Squid Palace or whatever you want to call it. And it really stands out in that way. Of course, I had no way of knowing that when I picked it. I just wanted to get the first couple out of the way. But this is a really good one to end on because it does launch every character into the point of no return the rest of the way here.
Definitely. In the first episode, we really only got backstory on Gi-hun as far as like why he would feel the need to commit to the Squid Game.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, we know 455 other people felt that
Some
way.
of which are dead already.
Yeah, and I actually think you said, Spencer, for us, since this is our final episode covering Squid Game, it's important to kind of see what we think of the characters. But honestly, for the whole series, this is the episode that does most of that legwork.
It does. Yeah, you learn pretty much, all you're going to learn as far as why they're in this situation, how, sort of, what their motives are.
Yeah, you
And
really get to see what shaped them as people and what led them to this point.
usually
and
pretty bad stuff.
If Freud were looking at it, he might say what led them there was the ego or the squid.
Oh, shit. That was awesome.
I was
didn't-
waiting. I was
Yeah,
waiting for the squid joke.
I somehow wasn't, and that, wow.
You're
I'm proud of myself for that one. I'm not proud of anything
No,
I
that's
do,
good.
but I like that.
That's good. I'm going to take a moment to appreciate that. The intro in this one is pretty disturbing. You get an idea of what happens now, what they do after, not the full operation they're running, but you see that they're transporting all the bodies of the dead or nearly dead, in some cases, players,
Squidmund Freud.
in in coffins and burning the bodies. In some cases, I know they harvest organs in other cases, but they do have fires going. And
Do you think it was intentional that the show, this might have been me missing a thing too. First, you see that they're burning bodies, and then later you find out about the organ harvesting.
I have no idea, honestly. Yeah, I only when I said that out loud did I realize, obviously, they don't burn all of the bodies.
That kind of brought it back to my mind. Well, I think they do after they pull the organs out, but I'm not
yeah.
sure if we're even supposed to know that.
You
Not
would
yet.
at this point. No, all you see is that they incinerate everyone in the coffins, which I thought the coffins in their kind of their black presentation with the yellow bow around it reminded me of the gift that
Definitely.
Mhm.
gave the daughter in the first one.
The
Gi-hun.
symbolism of it all, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that was on purpose, but it just looked a lot like that present.
I think so, because I believe later on in the season, someone is given another business card that comes in a box wrapped like this.
Well, and I won't reveal it for listeners who haven't made it that far, but when we start to see behind the curtain what's
Yeah.
going on, a character who is looking into it finds a box just
Yeah.
like that.
Sure. Yeah. that I might be a recurring imagery that they wanted to present to us.
Also, another visually striking
Oh yeah,
thing.
it's the coffins are fancy. I actually made a note how
totally
attractive
die
the
in one of
coffin
those.
is, and we see here one of the players he's not quite dead, or she trying to reach her hand out, and the guard quickly comes over, shoves the hand in, nails it shut, and wheels it away into the fire. That's our cold open, so to speak, in this
The
one.
coldest of cold opens.
And then kind of a hot open in the sense that they're burning
The fire,
bodies.
right. The flames licking at the corpses, yes.
This first scene here, I have a feeling we're going to be talking about for a while because it's kind of important. The players are doing what you would be doing after being herded inside from that, where they're all huddled in the corner by the beds, all together at this point, because there's no factions that have divided them at this point. So the surviving people all went through this traumatic thing together, and they're traumatized, as you would be. Initially, Gi-hun just kind of thanks Song-woo for helping him, thanks Ali for helping him, and they're just talking a few minutes before the guards enter to congratulate the players making it through the first game. Out of those original 456, just 201 remain. 255 were killed. And one of the players, who is 212, and I'm not going to get her name right, but Mineo Han?
Minyo.
I always want to put the E before the Y.
AKA batshit crazy lady.
She is all over the place. You meet her here begging for her life. And again, you don't know her as anything other than player 212 at this point. She throws herself on her knees, begs for mercy, and everyone starts following suit when they see what she's doing. But the guards are not the creditors. She's saying, "Don't kill me, I'll pay, I promise." And the guards are saying, "Look, you're misunderstanding."
What do I have to do with this? I just work here.
Exactly.
This is maybe my favorite metaphor is guards as middle class. And that is it's so good.
As you learn increasingly about as the show goes on, basically, that the guards really don't have much of a say in any of this.
But also they do, because they're there working.
And they're making the evil means, they're bringing them to fruition. So it's,
But that's why it's such a good metaphor for what the terms it's dealing with, because essentially that could be such a form of plausible deniability of well, I've got to make my ends meet.
We mean you no harm. These are the rules of the game. That's all that happened.
I have to shoot you in the forehead. You lost.
It's like managers are a big part of that too. It's like, well, the employees also see themselves as better than the people in there, but you're still just a cog in the machine.
The power system is just there because someone's holding a gun or the power to fire someone in a managerial position.
Sure. And to be fair, at this point, the players are not easily placated by that information. They're still worked up. They're arguing back against the guards and saying, this is really not what we signed up for. This isn't fair. And the guards are saying, well, this is in the form you signed. The clauses specifically say that you can't stop playing once you start. So sorry, this is already a done deal.
And talking about this right now also, because I haven't really thought about it since I watched this episode, and now I've finished the season as we all have, it really brings into stark relief like how different the players are at the outset then later. They're not desensitized to absolutely everything like they will be soon.
Right. Yeah, they're all pretty much on the same page at this point. They're relatively unified as much as they're going to be. So it's actually Song-woo again who steps up and speaks for the group and says, hey, there's the third clause. We can vote our way out of this and go home.
I went to SNU.
That's where we learned about voting and majority and things like that. If the majority votes to go home, the games end. And the guards reluctantly say, yes, that is true. That is a clause. And we will do this. And if you guys want to leave, you can. However, let me show you the money that just came in from
Another really
game.
nice touch to the order here.
Yeah, they won't tell you until after the game is played because they know exactly what's going to happen after the game is played. So then they can show you this money afterwards and be like, hey, 255 players were eliminated. This pot is massive. It's 25.5 billion won. 100 million per player.
That'd be about like 10 million or so in US dollars.
It's a great deal of money, and they all immediately are, I shouldn't say all of them, but many of them are immediately reconsidering their position here about leaving. So the money goes to the bereaved families if they choose to leave. The departing players won't get anything. So that's another thing there is that people who died are the ones who win, in a sense, to the players who might want to stay at that point. Without anything else to say here, other than money and consideration, it's time for the vote in reverse order of the player number. So that means Gi-hun gets to go first. He does take a few seconds. He doesn't vote right away. I paid special attention to this scene to see how everyone acts because, like you, Brian, I'd kind of forgotten how they were in the initial stages, and I wanted to go back and pay special attention because some of them just go right up there, like
very confident.
Kong Sae-byeok, she goes up there and just immediately says, "Yes, I'm staying. I want to do this."
Mm-hmm.
But Gi-hun, he thinks about it a little bit and then does vote to leave. He's like, I want to get out of here. This is one of the elements that start showing you he can be reasonable. He's not necessarily a total shithead. He does want to go home.
And that really, it paints a clearer picture of Gi-hun of being someone who, he's not a total asshole. He's just kind of had to develop into kind of a lie, cheat, steal kind of guy to get by.
He is a product of his upbringing, his creation. Like the surroundings pushed him into being a piece of shit because of the societal pressures. And we learn more about his backstory and really the tragedy that pushed him down this path later.
Yeah, it's much easier to be sympathetic toward him at that point. At this point, he's mostly done shitty things, and he may be guilty of wearing that title a little too easily at points in his life. I don't know. It seems like there are times that he's done shitty things and it hasn't bothered him as much as it should. But in this case, you get a glimpse. Maybe there's some growth opportunity here for him. The next player comes up and looks at the money. It's an older lady. She immediately decides after seeing the money, I think I want to stay. So then we get a sense this is actually how it's going to go, which is shocking and horrifying and gross that it turns out it's pretty much split, as you learn, across the 201 people who vote. It's largely split, and the pattern holds throughout. It's deadlocked at 50 at one point, and then, of course, deadlocked at 100 with the final vote. But we have half the people here who know for a fact that you will die in these games, and they are willing to stay for it. But what really gets me about this thing is its majority. So if you're voting for I want to stay, there are going to be people, and you win. There are going to be people who are held against their will that are now going to die because of it.
Live.
You are a murderer at that point if you're voting to stay, is the way I view this.
Which is why there's zero reason to vote stay.
Right.
Because even if you believe it's stay,
you're murdering
are
other people.
Like the opposite is not true. If you want to leave and you vote, well, I'll stay. That doesn't equal out to the same tragedy that voting to stay would.
Which is why it's hard to say anybody who votes to stay is redeemable at all. However, of course, and I'm pointing at the picture because I hate to say her name, it's impossible for me, but Kong Sae-byeok, who ends up being one of the most likable characters in the entire show, at this point has voted to stay and die.
Yeah, and we'll find out why later, and she has very personal reasons for wanting to stay, but then that also gets you, and I'm not making a judgment here, I just think it's one of the interesting things the show does, but it puts into your head, of course I should like her for her reasons, but are those reasons worth these people's lives?
No, they can't be.
And and she's very young, how does that factor into it? Why should someone her age be allowed to be in the Squid Game, or someone of any age? Because people get murdered.
Almost like there are questionable things about this game.
Yeah.
Another notable vote that we talked about before recording this actually is Soo picking to leave. Now, Brian has the theory that perhaps he's got his heist planned out because Soo wants to come back and rob them all. He's thinking that's maybe why he's saying, no, I think I want to get out of here, because doesn't really fit his character even at this point. So I still say that it's possible that maybe at this point you're not sure he's just necessarily all bad, and that maybe he does just want to get the fuck out of there.
I would lean more that it would just be self-preservation. Just like, the odds are against me. I'd rather get out because I'm smart and strong and I can earn money. So I can get out of my situation out there. In here, though, who knows? It's chaotic. So,
well, one of the
I don't know.
We just mentioned 3 possible ways that Soo could be thinking, and we don't cover a lot of shows with that much room for interpretation.
Yeah,
and he's not a particularly complex character either, so that's neat that we do even have that much of a conversation about it. But I
got a real big neck.
As I hinted at, this scene to me is kind of the crux of every character and who they are at the core.
Mike Trout's neck is bigger.
Maybe a little.
So I really wanted to hone in on this and analyze it very closely. As we talked about, they do ultimately choose to go home because...
Well, they're at 100, the 201st comes up.
Is the old man.
They bring up the squid pro tempore.
You guys...
figures out how to vote. Go
number 1 squid.
How far ahead of that were you guys? You snobs, you squid snobs. Did you foresee him? You knew he was going to be the last person to vote. Did you foresee him being the tiebreaker and voting yes?
No.
No, I didn't think he
I
would
thought
vote
he
yes.
was going to vote yes to stay because he had a tumor and nothing to lose.
Oh, to stay, yes.
Yes.
I thought he would vote to stay.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't think so because the implication we got earlier from him was that he was a kindly old man, and a kindly old man wouldn't sentence those many people to death.
I was thinking similar to what we get with some other characters. I thought the plot line was going to be like his grandkids need the money or something like that.
Sure.
But I guess I was genuinely surprised because even though when they do ultimately vote to leave Squid Island, I was still surprised because I thought the tension would be in how they stay.
Right.
Which it is.
Yeah, sure.
But only after they get out.
And that was what set up essentially the surprising episode was them
and more
actually
character
leaving.
building.
Yeah, and you don't know that. We talked about it up front like it just was a fact, but you don't know that they're going to get out of there, and I don't think any of us assumed they would necessarily. I figured they would stay, and that was the whole point of it, is that they got outvoted right away, and it's like, everyone sucks and wants to die for the money.
That's why the big money ball dropping from the ceiling is like...
Money pig.
Yeah, the money pig is a really good visual because it also answers the question I was having, which is, wait a second, I'm at the top of episode 2 and everyone's clamoring to leave. How are they made to stay? And then, of course, the way everyone's made to stay at their job or wherever else, someone just flashes money in front of you.
You dangle the carrot a little bit.
Really well done. And then putting further doubt into play by actually having everyone go home.
And then the other thing, too, is human beings are exceptionally bad at visualizing large number of things.
Yes.
Like when you hear a billion, when we talk about billionaires, I'll get into this already. No one really figures what that really means because to most people, the difference between a millionaire and a billionaire is like, whatever, they're both rich. There's a difference. There's a colossal difference. So with the big piggy bank falling down full of money, that does a great job visualizing to these unfortunate poor people how much this really is. And we just see it filling with money, and that happens over the course of this series, and that's just a very distinct visual.
I'm sorry, when you were saying all that, I remembered how you were like, I'd be in the Squid Game, but I'd
be out by this point.
I had to laugh just at the memory of you saying that.
Because that is kind of the ultimate thing we're looking at here metaphorically, is like, you really only have a couple options unless you're born without having to make that decision.
And I'm poor, so before I knew that it was a death
You're poor,
or nothing,
you have no kids.
Yeah, I'd be like, hell yeah, I'll go play a game. I love games.
Yeah, I'd be like, maybe it's WWF Raw Deal. Who knows?
Maybe it's Tetris Attack, and I can fucking ruin everybody.
I agree. There's not necessarily anything to lose by, even though it was weird and kind of shifty. It's like, you don't assume it's going to be mass murder. So that's what I'm saying. Everyone's blameless up until this point, and that's when you have to start drawing hard lines.
And that does make this episode and this vote kind of like
huge.
A line in the sand as far as now you know what the stakes really are. There's no plausible deniability. So if you wind up back here, you know why.
Another really interesting thing that happened in the voting, by the way, before we move on from that, is player 212, who we talked about. She's begging for life beforehand and then ends up voting to stay. She's one of the people who votes to stay, which her character is fickle and changes, of course, a bunch over the series of the show. But she immediately is like, yeah, I never mind. I want to stay. And she's one of the people who answers when someone's like, what is wrong with you guys? Like halfway into it, when it's very evident, there's a lot of people who want to stay. And some of the hopeful majority to leave are like, oh my God, we might not get out of here. And he's like, what are you guys doing? We're going to die. And 212 says, it's worse out there. It's going to, what do we got to go back to? It's going to be horrible out there too.
And we don't see her backstory, do we? I just realized that.
No, she's really just kind of a mercenary, constantly trying to get on everyone's good side for her own benefit throughout the show.
Chaotic imp placed in here to sow chaos. I can't think of a better word for it.
She is a chaos agent. She's just there to do that, right? Like because we don't get a backstory, and I think we talked a little bit last episode about how if you wanted to levy a complaint at the show, one of them might be its portrayal of women's not great. And 212 here is kind of the poster child for that.
And to that point, actually, I mentioned last episode an interview with a journalist who spoke with the director of it. And at some point in the interview, the director said something along the lines of, people resort to their primal instincts.
Oh, yeah.
So you see Deok-soo, who's this strong guy who will do anything to win, and you gravitate towards him because you know that might help you win.
Right.
Although that's not
Gross.
That's exactly correct, though. It's why humans are prone to chasing authoritarianism.
Exactly. But he also goes on to say something like, and then women use sex to get the things they want, because she does, Minyo. And the journalist says something along the lines of, you don't see a problem with just making women do that, or, and I'm paraphrasing here, that women solely use this in your portrayal of women. And the director got offended. Like and that was the first thing that I read in this article that made me go,
Yeah,
but
not
South Korea's, again, a
Right.
very conservative nation, so women's lib
They're probably
is
not so.
quite
Yeah,
where
they're
we
not
are.
very advanced on that.
So that is a valid complaint, I think, Brian, that the treatment of women is a little questionable. It's not terrible.
Well, it's kind of like saying, like, well, all these different male characters offer a lot of things, like physical strength, virtue, intelligence, cunning. The women will fuck you in the bathroom.
Yeah.
And
And women will store cigarettes in their vagina.
And it could
Yeah.
just be that, she's trash, she's an asshole, has nothing to do with the gender. It's presented poorly. However,
Well, I mean, that's the argument. presented
Kong
poorly.
Sae-byeok is much better. She's actually one of the best characters in the show. So at least it's not universally applied in that
Yes,
case. It's
for
not,
sure.
It's not all bad toward women. Maybe she's just supposed to be, we've got Deok-soo, who's the guy asshole. Maybe she's supposed to be the girl asshole.
Mm-hmm.
I think she is. She just doesn't get a backstory. He
Right,
does.
right.
That's my only
Yeah,
thing.
there's
is
no
she-
depth. She's just kind of a
Yeah.
bitch.
Mhm.
And
That said, she gets a cool moment later.
yes,
Mhm.
and you actually don't. At least I didn't. Of course, you don't know as much about her in this episode, so you don't realize how much she's immediately showing like several different sides just within minutes of each other. But yeah, I found it very noticeable that after knowing everything I do about her, that she's falling on her knees, crying to leave, and then voting to
Yeah.
stay within like 5 minutes.
And that
So
actually,
manipulative,
that
yeah.
does make Minyo, who we're talking about, makes her a lot more interesting.
Mhm.
Yes.
And this is the first time I actually realized she was going to be like a regular in the season.
Mhm.
Yes, this episode is where you find out who's going to live in the Squid Game the longest, basically. You see who's the people who aren't just cannon fodder. They're not just there to die like in the 200-something doll game people.
Well, let me posit this, because I do think maybe I could levy some criticism at that concept. Like, we're introduced to our main characters right here, and we're the main characters. We know that now. There's nothing tossed at you to throw you off going forward. However, from a narrative standpoint, for the most part, when you're telling a story, you're not going to just focus on random people.
No.
You're going to
Exactly.
focus on the main.
Yeah.
This is the
So I
exact,
struggle with that.
That's the exact thought process that I had, which is at first I was like, well, you kind of know the 15 people you're really going to be looking at, but of course you do. It's a story.
Yeah,
it has
how
to
it-
yeah,
how
when
does it
does that
work?
not happen?
It's
yeah.
not going to spend time focusing on someone you don't need to know about.
Yeah.
But I had the same thought.
No, it just makes it not very suspenseful because, you know who's not going to die, at least in the early parts of the games. Later on, it gets a little questionable, but yeah, and you can tell even in the first episode because some people get their close-ups more than others, and other people are just there to read the lines.
It's like you're watching like the 1999 Royal Rumble or something. Steve Blackman's not winning it.
He's just there
He's
for
going to
filler.
get thrown over the top rope.
I there's got to be some wrestling fans who would just absolutely love that reference, but I don't know that anyone that's
I'm
listening to
hoping
this.
so.
There are a couple.
I'm sure it was great.
I loved it.
I'm sure it was great. I just can't understand it myself. I don't know who that is. Who's Steve Blackman?
The lethal weapon.
That's a fair question. This guy trained in Siberia.
For 7
He wears
years.
business slacks and no shirt.
Uses kendo sticks.
I'm interested.
Mhm.
I like
And
it.
Van, why don't you tell Spencer what he does to India?
Pump kick.
He does a pump kick.
But it's a good pump kick. And he's the guy that if you ask any of the wrestlers from that period of time, like, who in real life could kick your ass? They're all like Steve Blackman. He's terrifying.
But he's not winning the Royal Rumble. though.
No, he doesn't have a personality.
No.
So they wouldn't be like, yeah, this guy could
That's
carry
true.
the company.
Yeah.
He's head cheese.
That's the thing with Deok-soo. He's an asshole, but he's got some personality.
He could carry the company. He could win the fucking Royal Rumble.
I am so proud of us right now that we were able to weave Steve Blackman into
Into
our
Deok-soo.
episode, into anything we've ever done.
Into Squid.
Yeah.
So the guards get a little bit passive aggressive here when the vote turns out to be okay. Yeah, we're leaving. They're like, the people who did vote to stay, they're like, let us stay. We'll stay anyway. We'll play on our own. And the guards like, oh, regrettably, we hate to close the business, the murder business on these on this note, but the vote has been made, and regrettably, we have to drop all of you off. We have to dump all of you off on the side of the road without clothes.
And this is where they again reiterate, though, hey, if more than half of you decide you want to play again, we'll restart this game.
I was kind of confused by that. It's like the majority just voted, and he's saying, well, if the majority votes the other way in the future, then we'll play some more. I thought
could this happen at any time? Like you're 55 years pass. Wait, more than half of us want to play now.
At that point, we get to see everyone getting dropped off in pairs. Who we get to see is Gi-hun and Kang Sae-byeok, and then later Sang-woo and Ali. These are both pretty telling scenes, actually. Another really good. The pairing is another way to reveal more about the characters here. We don't get to see very much from Gi-hun and Kang Sae-byeok, to be fair, because he is still kind of in his bitter stage where he just wants his money back from her.
I love this part.
So they get dumped off. They kind of help each other out of they're bound and gagged, of course. So they kind of help each other, but she is quickly, as soon as she's free, like, I'm getting dressed and getting the fuck out of here because I know this asshole is going to start bothering me.
He's like, no, I wouldn't ever do
Swears
that.
on his mother's life.
Yeah.
And his mother's life not to bother her. And then, of course, does the second she helps him.
And
immediately.
The actor pulls it off comedically really well because he, no hesitation, starts hopping because his feet are still bound.
How dare you, bitch, give me my money back.
I love the fact that he actually just does, the scene ends with his feet still bound.
Yeah.
Like that. She never does that. She just walks away. And that's where you get your sense of how cool Kang Sae-byeok is. Just her kind of dismissal of him, like, oh, God, you're annoying, leave me alone. And she disappears. He's left where he is. At least his hands are free. So, you're assuming he'll be able to get back.
I think in her case, certainly the actress's case, it worked in her favor that this show did well what it did well, because she does that thing that models who aren't actors do, which is just like when you see models on a photo shoot and they're looking at the camera, they're like, oh, camera.
It is more vibe.
And she just does that.
It's more vibe than what she says, her line reading.
And her character really calls for more of that because she, I don't want to say she's a character without depth, but being detached is the character.
Yes. So that's why it works.
Yeah.
Whereas oftentimes it does not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure if they'd given her some really complicated dialogue, she would not have succeeded very well.
Another model turned actor, for instance, is Lorenzo Lamas. And also Kevin Sorbo.
I just realized we talked about the horrible English dubbing and how the English voice actors were just really bad at everything. I think you could have slipped Emily Deschanel in here and no one would have noticed because she fits right in with these horrible dub actors.
And I'm sure at some point during Squid Game, people talk about bones.
Oh, certainly.
Like when they're incinerating them or something.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guard talk, so yeah, I would imagine they do get into bones at some point. Also, by the way, I really liked, I don't know about you guys, because sometimes I see a scene differently than you guys do, such as when I think a scene is sad. I had to bring it back. I had to. I couldn't help it.
Okay.
No, I actually really enjoyed Sang-woo and Ali's scene quite a bit.
Oh, absolutely.
They're
in retrospect even more.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. They go to whatever that little cheap restaurant is where
I think it's like a
gas station
convenience
or
store or something
like
where
that.
they have food. Yeah.
Yeah, and they basically bond. Sang-woo has a cell phone that he's charging that he lets Ali borrow. He pays for his bus fare. I think he buys his food too because Ali's broke. So, and Sang-woo, despite the fact that he owes like billions of dollars, does have money in his wallet. So,
and this is another really nice touch. When you're rich still.
Right. Even though he is a criminal and his life is eventually over, he's still, when he puts on his clothes from when they drop him off, it's a suit. So when he puts back on his clothes, you could never tell where he just was.
Now he may owe $6 billion, but like the thing about and that's what a person in his position will say is like, you have no idea how bad it is for me.
But it's still fine in a lot of ways.
Ali can't get home, and that's
he was going to walk like 10 miles.
And he was going to do it happily too, like cheerfully. Yeah. He's the most like well-adjusted guy ever. He's just super nice, happy-go-lucky. And in this one instance, Sang-woo, and he gets to do a couple nice things, and this is one of them where he's just and genuinely does like Ali. That's clear throughout.
I think one of the cool things they do with Sang-woo is he does genuinely like a lot of people, and we see what is supposed to be the good side of him and stuff, But later we find out that is aspirational. That's not who he is.
He can't.
I do think he wants to be that.
It's a facade for sure.
Yeah.
When his back's against the wall, he abandons it. Yes. Yeah. That's. I mean, it makes sense, but you get to see the good part of him here, and it comes out kind of sporadically throughout the show
scene too.
And he honestly does the thing. This is how I took it. This may not be how it was meant to be or how you would interpret it, but I get the sense that, he gives Ali money for the bus. He buys him food or whatever. And Ali's like, no, I can't do this. I can't take it. And he plays it off like, it doesn't matter. To me, that Song-woo does, that was a case of almost pettiness on his behalf. Like he's doing it because I'm better than them. I feel pity. So here, I'll give you that. He wasn't doing it necessarily to be the great guy.
The only reason I would say I don't know that I see it that way is that Ali is overly grateful, calls him sir, and he's like, don't call me that. I'm not your sir.
Yeah, true.
Like he doesn't let him grovel or anything.
I have another option possibly.
Good.
Is it that he's a squid?
Fuck, how did you so I think all of this could kind of simultaneously be correct. I got like a sense of, he does want to help Ali, but part of it is buying freedom from his own guilt of getting involved in the whole Squid Game thing in the first place and kind of being able to say like, well, I did a nice thing.
Yeah, pat myself on the back.
Not that he didn't want to do it,
no,
but it's also inconsequential. This is an amount of money, and again, this is a nice little metaphor, an amount of money that means so much to Ali.
And so little to Song-woo.
And nothing to Song-woo. But Song-woo would never regularly let Ali have that.
Mm-hmm.
I do agree that there was something about it that was inherently generous. Like, he didn't act particularly pleased to help it.
No.
Like, he just kind of did it, but he never smiled and he never really seemed to be enjoying his company like Ali did him. There was that element, and some of that might have just been Song-woo's kind of restrained anyway.
It's kind of a good show of the duality of that character.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, I really enjoyed those two, and the fact that they did click the way they did, and it's the foundation of their relationship for the rest of the show.
All the little pairing scenes in this episode do. I mean, we've said this already, but they are really effective. And after seeing how the first episode ended, if you would have told me, like, well, next episode everybody's gonna pair off and talk at restaurants,
that's so strange, and I never could have possibly known that. When I said we're going to take the first two, that this was going to be one of the ones we talked about, because it's so unlike every other episode in the show.
But like just as good.
It's
I
great,
wouldn't have thought that.
Super deep, right?
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should look at something that is not super deep.
Okay. I can
Ease
do that.
The tension a little bit.
Are you talking about All in the Family again?
I wish we were talking All in the Family. Instead, we are talking According to Jim, America's preeminent comedy show from the early 2000s. Let's take a listen to one of the noted best clips of all time on YouTube of According to Jim.
Okay, it's the first Thanksgiving, and you turn to the pilgrims and you sing,
corn and fish, we have brought our favorite dish. Welcome to the new world. Please don't kill us and steal our land.
It's pretty funny, right?
I like
This
it.
is According to Jim.
Yeah.
You know what? Let's do a second one right here.
Here's something, milk.
not now, it'll spoil your dinner.
No fair. Mommy, what's ovaries?
What the fuck?
All right, just drink it in your room.
Drink the ovaries?
Chocolate milk. But hey, no, it's like we can't talk to our children about things because that's tough to do. Have some chocolate milk.
Van, you're predominantly Native American. Do you think that your ancestors would appreciate having genocide committed against them so they could be the butt of an According to Jim joke?
Do you remember the old commercials from like the 80s and 90s where the people litter and the Native American cries, sheds one tear? I think that's how they would react to it.
Gosh. I don't think it's... this is just off the clips you've played, but I don't think According to Jim's as good as Squid Game.
I'm saving the best According to Jim clip for last.
Good.
According to you.
According to Van, the According to Jim clip. It's the second time I've said that fucking sentence, and I hate it.
Well, on that note, let's take a quick break, and then we'll talk more Squid Games when we get back.
At a certain point, it's a dropping off point for us, and now we talk about everyone's backstory the rest of the way. We're not quite there, but soon it's everyone's little quest that leads them back to Squid Game Island.
Which I think anyone watching this knows is where this has to end.
Of course,
it's called Squid Game, not Gi-hun's mom's house.
No, there's nothing wrong with the fact that you know where it's going to go. But
no.
Most of this episode, and I didn't pick up on this as much until I watched it the second time for the notes, is so much of it about halfway is it's like, okay, and now here's everyone's path right back there.
Yeah.
You really get it. We're not quite there yet because first, and the scene is interesting in unintentional ways too. Gi-hun decides he's going to go report his story to the police station, which is a whole bunch of things. You guys might have some thoughts here as well.
Definitely shows his lack of understanding about the scale of this.
Well, as I put in my notes, he has decided to wander into a local police station and explain the details of Squid Game to the officers on site, which they're doubtful anything he's saying is true, mostly because, of course, it sounds ridiculous. It's supposed to. Like, I mean, the concept, you've got to think that the henchman and the front man and whoever's involved in all this, which we don't know yet, and I kind of still don't, to be honest. Like, I don't know how the whole thing was formed, but they had to have thought, yeah, there's no way anyone will ever believe this anyway, even if it does get out.
And the joke here is, of course, Gi-hun tells the cops all about what's happening, and they repeat it in blunt statements, which is so absurd.
It's absurd.
And I do enjoy that kind of humor.
Yeah, it was definitely. He knew what it was going for. It was self-aware comedy anyway.
Right. It's the joke where essentially Gi-hun is going to look like an idiot because he might as well be saying like, and then Barney and Bigfoot chased me on a roller coaster.
And he's got no physical proof aside from the card, which is the only lead that he leaves them with. And of course that does lead to something, but the main thing from this entire scene really that leads to a big plot point for the rest of it is at the very end, a young man police officer comes in. I think he's like bringing in someone or something, but he overhears the end of it, and eventually that's a trail that he follows.
And he sees the squid card on the desk.
Right. Yeah. And that kind of all ends up leading to a separate plot point. But for the most part, we're using this scene as comedy in the moment. And he actually does, and I enjoyed this, Gi-hun gets the desk officer to call the number on the Squid Game card, but it isn't the front man or anybody at Squid Game Palace. It's a confused, tired, and angry woman. I've got a clip for you guys.
Sorry to call so early. Could I come play in those games there?
Games?
Yeah. See, games are my thing, you know? I'll play all the games you ask me to. I'll do the best.
Okay, hold on. Who the heck are you, and why are you calling me this early with this nonsense? If you want to play games, go to an internet cafe. What's wrong with you, you freaking pervert?
Whew.
Get your ass down to the internet cafe.
There is so much to unpack from what she said specifically. First of all, do they have internet cafes in Korea that we don't?
Yeah, that's where you play Where in the World is Carmen San
Why?
Diego.
It's where you play StarCraft,
which
is actually accurate.
There and like died here. The business model has not survived here at all.
And it's literally people live at these cafes. They pay the fee to have the seat, and that's part of the whole South Korean poverty, capitalism, all that stuff. But at the cafes, you go to these places. They either have a computer or a place where you can put your computer and you play games with other people. And people died playing games.
I've read about that. The guy played an RPG for like 2 days.
And he died. Like he just straight up fucking died from playing Final Fantasy VIII or whatever.
But maybe
I've
just
died
didn't
in
eat it all.
Fallout before.
No, he died.
Squid
Games died.
The guy?
Mm-hmm. Fallout 4 guy.
What did he do wrong? Did he not have anybody in his party to protect him?
What I think happened is he didn't have enough pylons, so therefore
you got
monster
the idea
yelled.
behind it, I think. The gist.
StarCraft is big in Korea. That's the joke here.
Another thing about that, because she's kind of laying into him, but using kind of soft language, which I enjoyed, calls him a freaking pervert, and there's something else about that, she uses a really kind of not really a cuss word, and it makes me, and some of it was insulting. It's almost like if you were to be like, you gosh darn fuckhead, like if you were to combine like really extreme language with PG language, and that whole thing was off, and it's probably because of the dubbing. That's
the dubbing's
instance where the dubbing doesn't work.
This is another situation where obviously with audio clips we have to use English. Our audience is predominantly English speaking, I would imagine.
They all are.
But there is this disconnect when you're hearing when you're an English speaker and you hear someone saying something so not like anything a person would say in English. Whereas when you're watching and you're hearing it spoken in Korean and seeing the written word, it's not as jarring.
One thing I wanted to talk about is the concept of police in South Korea compared to what we would consider police, because it's like a small, dumpy police station.
And they're all just kind of hanging out.
And they're goofy.
Yeah.
Like, whereas if you go to a police station here, they're going to be like, son, listen to me, I'm a cop. and this is how it's gonna fucking be.
Can you imagine like a desk sergeant just going along with you and like, okay, fine, I'll call this number and be like, yeah, I want to play the games. Like that guy's clearly just enjoying it and having fun with it and actually, but also he's following up on it. Cops would not do that. They would, no cop ever, they'd be like, get the fuck out of here or I'll put you in a cell or something like that.
And that's because we live in a police state in the United States.
I noticed no one was murdered for no reason by any of the police officers in this scene. Weird.
No, the cops seem to be well-meaning for the most part, and the officer who follows up on all the leads, he's diligent if nothing else. I didn't have a lot of thoughts on him, and we can't really get into it in this episode, but the police are certainly never presented as anything bad in the show. They're not the bad guys here, that's for sure.
They didn't have their guns drawn the second someone said a word. Doesn't matter what the word is. They just pull the guns out.
I did notice that though, that it was such a casual, almost like lighthearted setting in the jail, and they were all laughing at the story.
And I think that's just how police are in a lot of other nations, and that they're less in a domineering fashion like they are here, and more in a supplementary fashion.
I think a lot of that's cultural because like police are glorified in a weird way here, where in a kind of a Rambo way sometimes.
Following this scene here is when it starts to get into where things unravel for all the people who've they've gotten their newfound freedom, but maybe things aren't going to work out in the real world for him after all. Gi-hun attempts to go home, but his mother's nowhere to be found. The door's kind of open and it looks like I don't know, he senses something's not quite right about it. So he actually heads to the market area where Sung-woo's mother works, or I believe it's kind of in that region, because he does find Sung-woo there hiding and sort of peering at his mother, I believe, from behind a stall or something.
I assume he was just making sure she's okay.
Or maybe he was getting the courage to tell her everything and then couldn't quite do it or something.
Yeah, it's something in that vein, because we'll find out later, like, well, I mean, we can say it. He's already said it.
We're going in it right now.
Predators are after the guy.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is. He doesn't want to put his mother in any more danger. He wants to check on her. So it's a little bit of everything kind of sprinkled in one.
It ends up looking very weird, though, because he's kind of poking his head around at his own
like a
mom.
pervert. Yeah.
More kind of weird indecision out of Sung-woo, because that's kind of his thing. He can't quite commit to who he wants to be when he has the actual choice. And then when it's just visceral reaction, he sure does.
And I also really liked this pairing, too, because you haven't seen a whole lot of Gi-hun and Sung-woo yet. And
childhood friends.
Exactly. Yeah, you get a chance for them to talk a little bit. Gi-hun gets a vending machine coffee and Sung-woo's smoking a cigarette, and they're just kind of hanging out back there. And Gi-hun's, honestly, I kind of respect his advice here. He's like, just come clean. She's your mom. She'll be okay, and you can start fresh. You don't have to be weighed down by the past. You can fix this. And that's where Sung-woo's like, oh, it's way worse than they thought. My debt's actually billions of dollars worse than they know. And on top of that, I put my mom's house and business up for collateral financially.
What a guy.
Yeah.
So you can see the stakes for him are actually much more dire.
I went to SNU.
Didn't work for him.
Wait,
apparently.
what?
Yeah, I shit you not.
Huh.
I think that this pairing is also one of the more interesting ones because, well, we get it. It's a very prominent one in the series.
Of course. The biggest one, probably.
Yeah, but it also is important thematically, I think, because they grew up together. So while they're they wound up playing Squid Game through different circumstances, but they also started sort of around the same place. So how did that happen?
Different paths to get to the same result.
Sure, yeah. At this point is actually where Gi-hun gets the call about where his mother is. She is in the hospital. Her diabetes has been untreated and has taken a turn for the worse.
Wilford Brimley has gotten a hold of her. Ugh,
it does
bad.
look, they do a good job like showing her foot. It looks really awful. It looks terrible.
I thought she was dead because they start with the foot and I'm like, oh no.
I was like, oh, that's awful. She died when he was in there watching hundreds of people die.
Yeah, you do learn pretty quickly. This is not good for Gi-hun because we realize how serious the situation is. He kind of lectures her because his mom's wanting to leave the hospital and kind of get back to work and live her life. And he's like, you can't do that, Mom. You got to be treated. Health insurance pay for that. And she's like, Gi-hun, you canceled the health insurance.
Yeah, you fucked us over, buddy.
You canceled it, and we can't afford medical bills. I can't stay in the hospital. I've got to leave, and I've got to get back to it. I don't have the energy for this. I don't want to talk about it anymore. And she leaves.
And this also shows the point of, all right, Gi-hun has seen this atrocity of seeing people die from this game. So he, at this point, is like, nothing is as bad as that. No matter how bad it is out there, it won't be as bad as that. So we can work through this, Mom. We can get you the treatment you need, blah, blah, blah. She hasn't experienced that. So to her, it's like, we're fucked. We're in the worst spot.
Like, I got to get back to work or nobody's going to be able to pay their rent, I think is what she says.
Yeah, and it's... true for the most part.
Yeah, and it's also another very clear commentary of why are people choosing between staying in the hospital and getting their medical care or going back to work.
I can tell you 100% that
I
identify very much so with that. Like, hospitals, are you kidding me? I can't afford that shit. I don't care if I am dying. I can't go to a hospital. It's very relatable.
That one
so
trip
relatable.
or something like that.
You'll pay on it the
done.
rest of your life.
You're done.
Yeah. It's honestly, it's not worth it unless you actually are going to die because it's like,
and even
I can't afford it. It might be easier to die, yeah.
But that's kind of Squid Game's thesis.
Really quickly here, we actually get a quick follow-up from the police station. And actually, I don't think I caught this the first time I watched it. I only realized it after going back and understanding what happens afterwards. But we do get a quick reference to the police officer at the station following up on the lead. He's on the phone with his mom driving in the car. She's worried about his missing brother. He says, he's disappeared before. He'll be fine. He'll turn up. And besides, I'm a police officer. I'll find him. So he's going to track him down. The first kind of step in his journey is to check out the abandoned apartment that his brother left behind. There's nothing there except for like a fish bowl of dead fish, which is sad.
R.I.P.
Yeah, and a little card in the box. And I think one of you mentioned earlier that there was another instance of that box with the Squid Game card inside of it. So that's the one clue. And he sees that and he's like, hey, that's the same card that Gi-hun left at the police station.
That crazy ranting.
I gotta tell you guys, this is a nice looking box too. Like you could put some really interesting shaped items in that tiny little box.
What would you put in it?
I feel like some pens, like some nice pens, like a little collection of.
I like fancy boxes.
That would have been a nicer idea to put in that box.
I think so, but as I'm saying this, it does occur to me that this is yet again me talking about various boxes, kind of like the hat box thing in the.
They are cool boxes, though. I agree, and I actually thought, like, I'm assuming this is supposed to be like a downtrodden place to live, but I thought his apartment looked kind of nice. Like, it looked cool. It had interesting decoration.
It was very small, but it was interestingly lit too.
I can do small.
Oh yeah,
I'm
me
okay
too.
With that.
Well, I mean, we're gonna forever, so we better hope we can do small.
So now with that established, we're starting our descent into every character's little personal hell, and we visit next. We learn a little bit about Sae-byeok's backstory and some sort of Korean orphanage that her little brother is at, and we just get kind of the premise of this, but. The family's been split up. She's trying to get the parents in she's actually from, they do mention this in the first episode, she's from North Korea. So she's trying to get her family whole again. There's a whole process for that she has to spend money on. That's why she robbed Gi-hun in the first episode. And we learn a little bit about that whole process and how it's taken quite a while. And in the meantime, her little brother is just kind of stranded in this orphanage. And it's supposed to show you again how much emotionally is at stake for all these characters, and it does immediately have you feeling pretty sympathetic toward Sae-byeok.
And Sae-byeok, she's pretty significantly older than her younger brother too.
I did
He's
notice
like
that
6 or something.
Yeah. So she probably.
What do you think? She was like 25, maybe
somewhere around that, or early 20s probably. And it also kind of visually shows you, she's kind of his only real caretaker.
Right. And she's pretty much solely responsible for him. And he's worried that he's going to get left at the orphanage forever, which is horrible.
While you can see certainly why she'd be motivated to do the Squid Game thing, even after the murders. But again, like we talked about,
other people,
the hundreds of other people whose lives you're putting at risk could come into play, and maybe a less desperate brain, but that's kind of, again, part of the show. Everyone's very desperate.
Well, part of her character is, I don't know if we've even mentioned this, but she's a North Korean defector.
Yes.
And I won't get into that, but what I will say is that certainly, at least in this show, the narrative that we know of North Korea is also pushed so that it's a desolate hellscape where no one gets anything, and they
you have Kim Jong-un's picture on your wall, and you have to go to a weird ribbon dancing ceremony.
And that's part of their culture. I won't get into the history of it all, but South Korea wants reunification. They want the North to become more like it is. Now, I think if I wanted to say, and I'm not advocating that North Korea is this, brilliant utopia, but what I think is our government, the U.S. government, is excellent at pushing narratives, particularly when it comes to anti-capital or communism.
Sure.
Oh yeah, they've got 100 years about of doing that.
So I think the push of that North Korea is this just hellscape where everything is vile. No one has anything. There's no internet. There's nothing. I think that's a little strong, but also the show's going to push that because it's from a South Korean perspective, which does push that narrative and have that narrative. So from a whole separate standpoint, I think there's a little more to the story. I think it's still a dictatorship and it's still awful.
Say,
of course,
to be fair, it really is a dictatorship.
Yes.
And
however,
we
I
do
don't
have
think it's
a lot of video evidence of some of it.
But we also have a lot of video evidence of the other side of it.
Yes,
there's big shopping centers and happy people having
I think what we essentially see is that it's probably like everything. It's fucking terrible, but it's not accurate.
Right. So that's an interesting standpoint for me.
Yeah.
And so
she's a very actually pretty complex character when you get all the backstory involved.
Exactly. And people love to push that thing. Like the first thing when you say about North Korea is people talk like, oh my God, it's the worst place it's ever existed. And it very well could be. But I have now in my age, after learning a lot of U.S. history and world history and mankind's history, I kind of
he also was Do Love and Cactus Jack.
Exactly, he was. I step back a little bit and go, what really is the truth? That's usually somewhere in the middle.
I think at this point you have to consider that there will, whatever the case. Like for instance, the showrunner here might not have a I'm going to show this only from South Korea's perspective agenda, but that's probably all he's ever been taught.
Everything he can.
Yeah.
And so that actually helps influence her character and her decision to stay is that she comes from utter hell. So maybe even that is just like, it's not even that big of a deal.
She does seem less fazed by it than most of the players.
Maybe any of the other players.
She doesn't ever really have any mental struggles with that part of it because I think she just knows how to distance herself and not be personally affected by it just out of necessity. So that is fair to in defense of her as far as the immediate hitting the let's stay button when she went up there. That's fair. Still, it's a shitty thing to do, but there is a lot of context behind it, so I get it as much as I can.
Certainly.
The scene here that takes place between the two of them also, I couldn't help but kind of laugh about this because there's a little bit of exposition dialogue taking place because they felt like they needed to. They really wanted to make sure you knew that was her brother, even though I think it was fine. It was obvious enough. But she has the line at the very end. She's like, of course I'll figure it out. I'm your big sis, right? And it's like, that's not something that you really say to anybody. Like, hey, by the way, I'm your friend, so-and-so. You don't have to tell somebody who you are. They know. So,
shows do that all the time.
I
They'll
know.
call each
They
other brother or
have to.
sister. It's like, listen, brother, no one, I don't have a sibling. Did you ever call your sister?
No.
Hey, sister.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of one of the problems a lot of times is shows.
It just makes me laugh is all. I know it's harmless.
It's harmless, but it is funny because you don't have to do it. And I know it's covering your bases for the lower end of maybe your audience.
Yeah. But just let them figure things out.
Who else would this kid be?
Right.
Other than her younger brother.
Do you think people are sitting at home watching this going, I can't fucking watch this show. I don't know who that kid was.
Yeah. Why is her husband so small?
I just really had to laugh at that because it's such a throw-in line at the very end. I'm your big sis.
It's like what a creepypasta author would
your
write.
Big sister.
It really is. If she had said her name somehow in that, oh man, that would be fantastic.
I was just in the Squid Game.
Her full name.
Oh God.
From the show Squid Game.
Airing now on Netflix. Your subscription can help pay for Squid Game Season 2.
This is actually my first acting role.
And also what you just said there a second ago, Van, about how her full name, like even using the
her brother.
Name.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Like the kid wouldn't know.
Can you imagine if that's actually a little brother and his response to his sister saying that to him, he'd be like, what the fuck?
Fucking weirdo.
Real quickly here, this is the shortest scene ever, and I hated to even include it because I knew it was going to be a jarring transition, but they go back to the police station where the young officer gets the address for I can never remember his name. I want to call him Hung-gi or something now.
Song-woo?
Gi-hun.
Oh, Gi-hun.
He
No,
has
what
to,
you said is what my tummy is.
Jesus.
Hung-gi.
Brian Hungy.
What?
This is like the fifth time you just
Jetstream.
abandoned the
This
paper.
fan, this fan is
Jetstream.
blowing my precious notes.
There's the jet stream.
And you-
I thought that was the
As awesome as
creepypasta.
it was, this hungry joke wasn't in my notes.
Oh, okay. That's why you threw the paper down. Is you want to be like, see how smart I am? I came up with this.
It's like a mic drop moment.
Or
Oh,
like
okay.
anger, like Brian
Yeah.
Hung-gi. Wrote down the notes.
The least intimidating thing you can possibly do is to throw down one sheet of 8.5 by 11
Which
copier
immediately gets
paper,
blown by a fan. Like,
Whooshes away.
that'll show 'em.
showing exactly like how ineffective the sheet of paper is, how easily it can be blown.
A very brief scene at the police station is all we need here to see that the officer is following up on this. He's going to start putting two and two together, and he's going to be meeting Gi-hun later on in the show. And that's about it. It is now time to just go on the trail of everyone's final scene. That's like, fuck yeah, I'm going back to the Squid Palace. So at first, we go to the warehouse, and this is another unfortunate scene. He's short a paycheck or two. So he has to head back to a boss who is clearly very sleazy and not paying his employees. Did you guys know what he was playing on his computer? I couldn't tell. It was like
I
some
didn't
sort of
look,
gambling
surprisingly.
game.
I wasn't sure either, but I did really like the touch of Ali coming in and be like, look, I need my back pay.
Yeah.
And the boss is like, oh, I'm busy. And
And
playing
he's
some
playing.
computer
I
game.
wasn't sure if it was like poker, like some version of Korean poker or
I
something.
wasn't sure what it was either.
Yeah, it was some digital silly thing. It looked like it was actual money, so it looked like he's gambling.
It's not the
With
Squid
himself
Game.
at his
No,
desk.
it's not Squid Game. Yeah, in any case, he's not paying him. Ali's being his usual self, like, please, sir, please pay me. I worked, I earned this money, and I want it, and you haven't given it to me. And the boss is like, nah, I can't. No one's getting paid here. I don't have the money, and I'm sick, and I'm broke. Leave me alone. So Ali spots a cash envelope on the desk, and that kind of sets him off. He, at that point, demands it. He follows him downstairs. They get into a physical scuffle.
Oh, it's worth pointing out real quick that Ali is missing a couple fingers on his hand.
I had not noticed
Yeah.
that.
And he says at one point when talking to the boss, he says, like, I have given you parts of me. And I don't remember if he held up his hand or anything, but the implication there is that an accident happened and still the boss isn't paying him.
I had totally missed that the whole time. Like,
I only saw it on my second time through, so don't feel bad in that regard.
I don't feel bad. I mean, it was
I'm still feeling great after talking about that emotional scene from earlier.
it was relatively subtle, actually.
It was,
so I
yeah.
don't feel bad. But no, I was actually even aware, of course, having watched it all the way through, that he doesn't have those fingers, and I still couldn't tell in that scene that ever came up. So I really didn't notice that at all.
I wonder,
It is
too,
a good point, though.
if this is another interconnected thing about the symbolism of like giving up your of physical
Yeah.
pieces of you to get by. Because, we have the more obvious version of that, which is literally signing away organs and stuff. And then this kind of being like, well, this
Blood,
is another
sweat, and
way that
fingers.
also happens.
Well, ironically, it's actually the boss who's about to lose a few fingers in this scene.
I love this.
During the scuffle, he goes headfirst into some kind of machinery.
Like
Do
a
you know
roller.
what it was?
It was something, I'm
Yeah.
assuming that feeds something thin through.
It's
And
not
it
a
just
lathe.
squishes him good. It's not a lathe in
It's
this
like
case.
the thing you might find a man's fully intact face on after they lost a lot of money at poker.
Yeah.
Like when
something
it
like that.
looks like that a lot.
So you peel
Did
it
you
off
guys
and put
think
it on
that,
the
by the way?
It did come to mind a little bit.
Because that's kind of a grinder.
Industrial roller in this case.
Yeah.
But yeah.
He didn't quite go all the way in his face, but his hand looked done to me. Like,
Oh, yeah, it was
you can't
toast.
see a lot, but in any case, everyone's horrified at Ali. Like, what did you do, Ali? And even though I don't really consider that his fault, they were fighting
No.
and the guy fell into a grinder, whatever it was. So in any case, Ali seems to be thinking like he's going to get accused of some major crime. Does grab the money on his way out. I noticed. That's kind of a.
Hell yeah.
He's getting the
Good.
which at this point.
He's owed it.
The cash envelope is just bloodied and gross, and he's grabbing that and getting the fuck out of there. So
And I think the implication with Ali and with this was that, because, we sit here and we're like, well, how can this guy just not pay them and get away with it? I think he's an illegal immigrant in that regard.
Yes.
And so clearly the guy's paying these guys under the table,
table.
screwing them over.
yeah,
And
So,
I
and you
think that's
can-
touched on, like, without saying it, because later Ali talks more about his family and his
That's
backstory.
right. And immigrating and
Yeah.
so on and so forth. Yeah.
yeah, they're in a pretty desperate situation too. So yeah, with him not getting the money he's owed, like it's terrible. It does show that again, Ali is kind of in this debt situation through no fault of his own, which is
he's
not
still a
like
good
the other
guy.
people
Mhm.
in that sense. Not that any of them are bad for just having deaths.
No.
but
Right.
it's
But
how
he's
they
purely innocent
Right.
in that regard.
Yeah, which,
Right.
as I said earlier, Ali is probably a bit too purely innocent.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also a little bit, I don't even know what the right word is for it. They make him
Squid.
childlike.
He's
almost.
very naive, like overly naive and trusting and kind of just dumb.
Yeah,
is how
he seems
comes
very
across.
stupid.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
I don't think that's how it's really meant, but yeah, that's how he comes across. It just is. He's overly
He's just
trusting.
like a little broadly drawn.
a little bit.
Nice guy.
But-
You like him.
Which is different.
You don't
from-
want him to lose any fingers.
It's different from Doc Soo, who isn't broadly drawn. He's just broad.
Broadly built.
Broadly exists.
The next scene here, which gives us another example of someone having to go back to the Squid Game, is with Kang Sae-byeok. She's meeting with, and I didn't know who he was. I just wrote down human smuggler contact.
I think that
Because-
is as accurate as you could be.
It's I guess he calls himself a broker or something, but
Human broker.
He's responsible for the transaction of getting her parents from North Korea to South Korea.
And he sells NFTs.
I'm sure he does all sorts of things. He's real shady, and he explains everything went wrong with that operation. That's just normal. That happens. They can do it again, but she's going to have to pay for the whole process to start from the very beginning.
And he's saying it as casually as you're
very
saying it.
Yeah, he is.
casually. He doesn't
Yeah.
give a shit.
I've robbed you and your family's still fucked.
But
And
look,
he's-
you can bring me more money and we'll see if it works out again.
He does. He's starting to tell her how, the, what is it, like 40 million or something, that's only to get him to China. Now to talk about, like, if you want to go all the way here, and in the middle of him saying this, and this is fantastic and way to go, Kang Sae-byeok, he's making this tea or something. I assume it's tea. And she picks up the boiling carafe and splashes it in his face directly in the middle of
It's
his
great, that
sentence.
motherfucker, because the whole time he's sitting there calmly being fancy with his fancy tea and his little suit. And, oh, man. And then saying horrific things.
Yeah, it just ruining her life and not caring about it. And then you hear the sizzle against his skin in the middle of that. So that was perfect. And her feisty spirit is pretty awesome in that scene. And she ends up telling him, like, she's got the knife to his throat. Essentially, though, what it comes down to is she is going to have to get him the money.
Yeah, I'll get the money, but you better not do this again.
Yes, like fix this and do it right. So whatever. But, she definitely has no choice but to pay him again. And that's her circumstances. That's where that scene ends. Now we have to follow up again with more Sang-woo business. Her mom's at the fish stall, as she often is, talking to him on the phone. He's continuing the lie. It seems kind of like he wants to tell her. I kept getting the vibe that he wanted to get into it, but he
He's
doesn't.
always, I mentioned this earlier with
That
him,
he's
he always
indecisive.
is like, just doesn't quite, he's in that part where he's trying to, I feel like part of him wants to be a better person, but he still isn't willing to do, every time a decision has to be made,
He's always on
He
the
makes the-
precipice of doing
he makes
the, right
the wrong
thing.
one.
Right.
Yeah. Or
Yep.
at least, probably morally the wrong one.
I'd say that's a fair assessment, honestly, because I think he probably called her kind of do that and just didn't.
And he went to SNU.
I know. If an SNU graduate cannot succeed in this world, who can?
It's also possible that she doesn't give him a chance because she gets a customer and has to hang up. And we briefly see his surroundings. He's in like some kind of hotel room or something, some temporary lodging. And we flash back to the market with the mom and the customer. She's talking to this lady that wants some fish from her about how great Sang-woo is and how he's single and
Always
rich
comes up in
and
successful.
successful. And
And how he went to SNU.
yeah, of course, yeah. And the woman's very impressed. Is he married? She wants to know. So
Can I fuck him?
in the middle of this all, a group of police officers comes up and says, hey, we're investigating your son.
We're
And
with the
he's-
Bunko squad, and we're looking for someone who's been involved in counterfeiting and embezzlement.
One of us might be a robot.
Is Carl Schillerman here?
The Dutchman?
Yes, the Dutchman.
It turns out, and we already knew this, but it turns out that Sang-woo's done a lot of really bad things financially and billions of dollars in debt. The cops are nice. They say, look, just tell him to get hold of us. It's going to look bad for him when he goes to trial, which is going to happen if he doesn't reach out to us. So
If he doesn't reach out to us or win all the squid money.
we go back to Sang-woo where the doorbell just rings and rings and rings while he is soaking in the bathtub in all of his clothes.
Fully clothed, yeah.
Fully clothed.
As we do.
I'm pretty sure no one's ever done that. In movies that, it's relatively common. Like it's every third person or so likes to get in the bathtub in their clothes.
Wet
That's
clothes
what you
are
do.
awful.
That's what you do when you're depressed.
Yeah,
you
or you jump
clothes.
in the pool in your full clothes.
Or you get pushed in the pool in your full
In
clothes.
your full clothes.
By your robot friend who's also a cop.
Sometimes that happens. What about Song-woo's awesome apartment?
Is that what I couldn't really
Pretty
tell
cool.
like where he was
I thought it was
living.
a hotel.
Maybe it was, but
either
there's
way.
a couple reasons I wasn't sure. You're right, it couldn't be his apartment. The police would have found him.
Yeah.
I was really
He's on
surprised.
the run.
I was really surprised at how nice the bathroom was and that he had a raised bed, which I don't know that I've seen often.
I didn't notice
in
the bed.
Korean movies.
I noticed too that he was all depressed and stressed, and on the floor he had like 2 beer bottles next to the tub. It's like his low point in life. He had 2 beers and got in the tub and clothes. That's I'm not convinced. Gonna have to work a little.
Do you
harder.
know how fucked up you get from getting in the tub and clothes? That's the real high, man.
15% alcohol content in that tub.
You guys want to go? You guys want to go clothes tubbing?
To continue the Ali story here, because it's rapid fire now from character to character. He has to race home to his wife and small child, throw the bloody money at her and tell her that she can't stay, he can't stay, she's got to go, and she's got to basically take the money and our child and run. And I don't think he gets much into, I have a note that he can't stay, especially now that he ripped off his boss's hand. But he doesn't get into that. He just implies shit's gone bad and you got to go and take this money.
I've given my boss a hand job and it is not what you think.
Okay, before you go on, let's go ahead and take our break here, empty our squid sacks, and then we'll come back and wrap up Squid Game.
Gi-hun is looking for work, so he goes to a bar that a friend owns, and there's no work to be had.
It's that same fat face friend.
Is that who it was?
Yeah.
I couldn't tell. So apparently that guy owns a bar. I didn't know that. Like I'd never drawn that connection.
Not a good one,
I
apparently.
like that Gi-hun asks him for money here too, knowing he's broke. Like they just hung out the
Starting
day before.
with the whole, can I have a job? Oh, well, can I have money then? He's desperate though, so he's gonna try every avenue he has, as we will soon see. And while Gi-hun decides to wait outside it's a pouring rain, but he decides to sit outside at their table in front of the bar.
Cool setting.
Yeah, it's awesome. The atmosphere in the scene is fantastic, but it is illogical to sit out in the rain and drink under a table that's just being rained on. He does do it, and then of course, who joins him other than the old man?
What?
Number
1, the first player, and number 456, the final player.
Yes. Do you think there's any symbolism in that?
A new generation meeting together the same problems, theoretically uniting them.
Poetry of it all.
There is another nice little bonding scene here where they get to have their drinks together, and number 1 is that like uncooked ramen that he has in the bag?
Yeah, they're just eating, which I can't do. I don't like it.
I feel like I would hurt my teeth doing
It's
that.
crunchy.
People do it. People
Yeah.
love to do that. No thanks.
See,
Because it's cooked.
I need the
Yeah, you
seasoned
can do
packet
it.
though. That's the whole reason I eat those things, is the seasoning.
And you can put that on the dry stuff.
It wouldn't
but I
stick
don't
as
know.
well though. I
Yeah,
mean,
it
I've
wouldn't,
Never, I've
and it
never
would
tried
be-
crunching into it.
So dry. Like,
Well, they have
ugh.
the sake or whatever.
Also, it's raining. Just like hold that thing out in the open sky. for
Nothing
a
like
bit.
some damp ramen.
Oh man, rain noodles are the best.
In any case, it seemed like one of those things where they're both slumming it together a little bit and they get to bond. And the old man kind of tells him, like, I got nowhere to go. I got a friend in this area and I don't have anywhere to stay. So,
But he's
guess what?
optimistic. He's so
always
happy.
cheerful.
Mhm.
He was cheerful right after everyone got shot. And
There's
he had
just something persuasive about the guy.
yeah.
Love the old man. My favorite character at this point.
How'd that work out for you?
Mm.
Basically the main part of this theme is the old man, after sharing all this food and drink with him, is like, I've decided to go back to the Squid Game.
And he does it. I love this too because it's very casual after, all the deliberation everyone had to vote to leave or stay. Everybody's had this horrible day. The old man kind of does say why, like he feels hopeless at this point. And then he just kind of says, like, who knows, maybe I'll win.
Mhm.
Because at this point, but the old man is the proxy for all the characters whose backstories we've essentially seen, and they're very quickly forced by the real world into selling their bodies for money, essentially.
And he has nothing. He has the brain tumor. He's about to die.
Yeah.
Why not? So that's
He's
his
an
kind of
elderly
thing.
man.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so my thought here, and I guess I didn't think about this through, so I'm going to think out loud right now, which is they said the majority. So the people that left and don't want to come back, they still have to? They
No.
wouldn't.
No, because
Yeah.
there was like 16 and 17 that didn't show up that they just took off.
Okay,
the
I never
total.
noticed that. So yeah, so in this case, wanting to go back isn't necessarily bad, right?
Right.
Because you're not bringing anybody who didn't voluntarily rejoin.
Correct. Yeah. Because
Okay.
because it was.
I don't know how I missed
I never
that.
thought of
Well,
that
we
either.
had 201.
Yeah,
when
you're
they did the
totally
vote.
right.
Well, when everybody comes back and we restart, we have like 176.
Yeah.
So that's so many people.
Yeah,
that
so it's actually once you vote your way out, it's justifiable if you want to say, "Oh, fuck it, I'm going back."
Mhm.
That's fair.
Right.
That's fair.
Yeah, I think, yeah, exactly. And the only moral problem at this point would be, say, if, and I'm not saying any character is doing this, you convince someone else to go back in.
Yeah.
Real quickly, before we do any more of that backstory, time to learn about Doc Soo, who, of course, is a hardened criminal. In his case, he's recently wronged the big boss he used to work for. So the whole syndicate, that's the only thing I can think to call them. I don't know what they are. Some kind of gang. The whole syndicate is out to get him.
The sharks.
The red sharks. I don't, they feel like they probably have some other adjective in
Yeah.
there. I don't
Blue
know.
barracudas, red sharks. Yeah, yeah, I understand.
The blue barracuda is like, are they playing the Legends of the Hidden Temple?
I mean,
Well, again, there's a lot of similarities.
We, if you had any doubts about Doc Soo at this point, we learn quite a bit here. He's meeting with a former cohort, and he does lay out the heist that he had in mind that Brian suggested could have been in his mind all along, and it's possible.
Brian wrongly suggested that.
He was wrong and stupid, but
No, because you guys, wait, hold on. Let me come up with all of our opinions. I thought perhaps that this career criminal had another caper in mind. Spencer thinks he's always been good at heart the whole time. Van, I don't know what you said.
I honestly don't remember.
I knew going in too. That's the bad part. Going before I hit the microphone.
So you're doing this thing where you set down the path, and
Mhm.
when you get there, it question mark.
this is something called the law of diminishing returns.
Eventually, something isn't going to pan out.
Doc Soo's a mean guy, and we don't like Doc Soo very much. Whether he planned this heist or not is irrelevant, although it is fun to talk about. And
You know what my honest opinion is?
I do want to
I
know.
thought it wasn't done.
I've thought about it, and I think we're all kind of correct. Because
I didn't
I
say he was
think-
good-hearted.
I-
I know you were paraphrasing that.
I was being way over the top, but I don't think that. I think that when Doc Soo voted to leave, it was self-preservation. As we all,
That was
as
my
But
fans-
stance.
he's such a murderer that I don't see him as being a self-preservation. He'd think he.
Oh,
he'd think he
later
could
I
win.
think he very clearly shows he's a self-preservationist.
No, but in the sense of,
But-
I think he would trust himself to win. I think he'd trust himself to come out on top in the games. Is what I was thinking.
Perhaps so, but like
I don't think he's that dumb.
I think there's definitely the
Then
chance.
he could have heisted the whole thing. He could have had the plan all
True.
along.
That's
he could be
I'm
an
the
Ocean's
chaotic
11.
mention. It could be either.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
in the
yeah.
middle.
And I think there's a chance that there's the combination too of where a certain hesitancy made him leave, and when he kind of comes to grips with dealing with his mob friends again, he comes up with the scheme.
Definitely, for
out of
sure.
desperation.
Yeah, and he seemed very proactive about wanting to go back at that point. So when that came up, who knows? But
We'll get in touch with the showrunners.
We have that poll.
Do you have Netflix's email address?
It's Netflix at gmail.com.
at Gmail. No, in any case, Doc Soo is very aggressive and very adamant that they don't have good men. They don't have good support when they pick you up. They're vulnerable there. So he's determined that if they voluntarily return, that this place can be overtaken and all that money can be stolen.
Bring some guns.
Yeah, he's like, we need all the guys, we need all the guns. So his core, it's like, yeah, well,
I mean, the place we were at did just gun down 250 people very quickly.
Without question
They
at all.
seem like they've got the firepower.
the giant doll is quite a vicious.
Look, I think our whole gang can take care of this giant doll.
the doll versus the gang.
That big boy doesn't got shit on our gang. The red sharks.
Well, it turns out some bad things are waiting for Doc Soo. He's done some, I couldn't get the whole thing. He had gone to a casino and lost a lot of money on top of whatever he'd done wrong inside his syndicate here. So this is
Which was, I believe, slowly embezzle money from the mob boss.
right.
The
yeah.
Thai mob boss.
Yeah.
It was a different
Something, yeah.
place.
Some they weren't from Korea because he soon welcomes them as he jumps off the overpass. But Yeah, they're very scary criminals who are after him, and his cohort, I guess, decided to help them. I don't know if for favor or for money or whatever, but he sold them out.
Yeah.
Understandable.
Shocker.
I'm sure Deok-soo was an asshole to them as well, as we see how he is towards everyone else. But
I bet he slapped his mom after he was born.
Usually you slap the baby, he slaps the
Yeah,
mom.
the opposite.
like, it's not funny, but it's telling. Deok-soo, when he learns he's been betrayed and his life is in danger, murder.
Yep,
The
right
first
away.
thing he wants to do is get justice on his cohort and kill him viciously, like 7 or 8 stabs in the middle of the street. So that's not run away, kill the guy first.
I liked that his cohort, who was essentially like the driver.
Yeah.
When they're going to meet the other people in the mob, is like a smaller guy who you get a sense maybe isn't as important in the mob. And the whole time I'm like, oh, Deok-soo's gonna bully this kid into being on his side.
And he certainly was trying.
But the kid's not. He's like, no, dude, you have fucked up.
Yeah, he overplays his hand a little at the end, or he's like, now you're gonna die, asshole, and then tries to run out of the car. Doesn't work.
Does not work.
But yeah, and that's actually kind of reminiscent of how the players treat him later in the show that we can talk about in the bonus episode, where when they don't feel like they have to suck up to him, they're just like, you're a fucking asshole, I hate you.
Yeah.
Like they'll tell it to his face if they've decided they're rid of him, and that's kind of what happens here too.
Another good kind of commentary on power dynamics and stuff of like how these people are just any random person once you take that power away.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's Deok-soo's problem, is he's got some really mean people after him. The end of the Gi-hun arc is coming here, and we see just how desperate he really has gotten because he is going to ask his ex-wife for money.
Mm-hmm.
That had to have been horribly difficult for him. I think he's hoping that he can beseech her with like, hey, it's my mom. It's not for me. It's my mom. She's got medical issues. You guys got along. She did a lot for you. What's he ask for? He asked for 2 million won. He explains it's for the mom, but that doesn't work. She's saying, I'm broke. I can't give you any money. It's not gonna be possible. They do briefly get into kind of a little petty fight where you get a little bit of the background story, but not much of Gi-hun's whatever traumatic work experience he had where a coworker died. You only hear that much here.
I know that he worked for Dragon Motors because that was mentioned at one point, and I thought the name was cool.
That is pretty cool.
I didn't catch that. Yeah, that's
I didn't either.
Great.
I like it.
I saw the word dragon and my eyes just shot to the screen.
We only know that this happened when she was giving birth to their daughter and that he couldn't be there, and she holds it against him to this day. So there's a little bit of conflict there that comes out. She's not giving him a dime. And to make it even more awkward, the stepfather of his
fucking stepdad,
the new husband, as I put him down in my notes, comes in with the kids, and they all kind of have to awkwardly interact for a little bit. So Gi-hun gets the fuck out of there.
I love the part where they cover Gi-hun being there by the wife saying like, oh, he came to see his daughter.
And he immediately leaves.
And he goes like, now I've seen her, time to go.
Yep.
He did not even try
He
to
didn't even
tell
say hi.
that lie.
No.
Yeah, like you could have at least been like, oh yeah, I just wanted to. Yeah, he's immediately like, I've seen her and I'm leaving.
Just like the last episode, the daughter wants fried chicken on her birthday, and he's like, no.
That poor girl. Yeah, it's like he really never does right by her, honestly.
No, here's a gun lighter.
You briefly think here that maybe the stepfather character is going to do a nice thing because he chases him outside and says, here, you wanted money, take some money. So Gi-hun's like, oh my God, thank you so much, I'll pay you back. You don't have to, says the guy. You just need to leave us alone. We're moving to the U.S. and it's easier if you don't stay in our lives. This money can buy you off from your family.
I'm buying you to never see your daughter again.
Here's some money, don't talk to your daughter ever again. Well, this is one of the times where actually Gi-hun is understandably mad. He punches the shit out of the dad, knocks him out in the ground. It's an awkward scene, but I kind of understood why he did that in that case.
Sure.
The daughter, however, did witness it and was like, Dad, why is that scene in? So
well, you know, at least she
sad.
will mentally note in the back of her head, Dad is stronger than stepdad. So in a way, Gi-hun did win one battle.
He also has the line that is supposed to indicate some sort of growth when he punches him and says, you asshole, you think money solves everything.
Yeah.
That little line right there, it's indicative of something. I actually really liked the scene coming up here, and I've got a clip of it after I'm done talking about it, but I didn't put it in for any reason other than that I really liked the sound and the presentation of this scene. On the way home, we get the officer who is investigating the case meeting Gi-hun, which was clearly getting ready to happen after he got the address from him. after everything Gi-hun's been through, it's, he's pretty downtrodden, despondent. He knows he's going to have to go back into the Squid Game event. So he's no longer interested in the story he was peddling to the police before. And he's in no mood to discuss that story. So when the cop says, hey, what were you saying about the doll and red light, green light?
Squid Game. Who would even combine those words?
It's like, oh, I just made that up, and I just found the card.
Yeah, I'm not going back in there to play again.
Yeah, he's no longer interested and wants to make the whole thing out to be a fabrication. He outright refuses to help. I thought, and we'll play the clip here in a second, I actually thought that there was an element of both characters being sort of frustrated and not getting what they wanted in the dialogue. It made me feel, and there's rain in the background and a grate of a gate. It made me feel like it was almost a noir scene.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
This whole episode, like, it's raining, everybody's outside with coats.
The gritty like dialogue has that scene, has that feel to it for sure.
He went missing a few days ago.
I just found it. I don't know. I saw it on the street and put it in my pocket.
Mr. Song, you can help me. I need to get him back.
Why would you think that I would be useful to you or anybody else?
Ooh. That's some serious dejection right there.
Tension. Feel that hook.
I love it.
Well, you did leave a business card with Squid on it on the police desk.
It was right then that the dame said to me that we got to get out of this rain and figure out the problem here.
You see, your legs started at the ground and they ended at the ceiling.
The final scene is the transport. The camera cuts to each of the characters featured on the episode, so we pretty much know who we're watching the rest of the way here. They all await pickup individually in their own spot. And we also see the officer tailing the van in his attempt to infiltrate the whole thing. And then, one final thing, she's super clever, that Kong Sae-byeok. She has covered her face just enough to keep the knockout gas, which I missed the first time watching it.
Very clever.
So she is not actually unconscious as she's returning to the facility. And we fade out from there with no idea what's happening next.
I did have one question. We do find out this is not the first Squid Game.
Right.
We'll talk about it more on our bonus episode. But I guess nobody's ever been pulled over on their way to the Squid Island.
I would imagine they own the cops. They own
they
the
probably
important
do.
people.
I do visually, I enjoy the idea of the Squid van getting pulled over and then like the PlayStation face guy has to explain himself.
With his mask on the whole
I
time.
got 12 people gassed out in the back and I look like the triangle button.
We've been playing StarCraft for a while.
If you press my face, I jump.
Well, guess what? They're all going back to the island. That's dark, man. This is not as dark.
And with all that money, she does a lot of charity work in Africa. That's why she wants to have her baby in Djibouti.
Doc, I think that's physically impossible.
Oh, Jim, Djibouti is a country in Africa.
Yeah, sure it is. It's just north of Jalegs.
Ooh, man.
One thing I think that makes jokes better is if you milk them dry by explaining every last fabric of them when the joke was the Laffy Taffy wrapper to begin with.
According to Jim. According to Jim,
that
sucks.
shit's hilarious, I'm sure.
So, I will say this. This episode, the way it ended, actually, I would not have been able to stop, I don't think, after the second one, had I gone one deeper, because at this point, now I see that everyone got out of there and then was hooked back in. Mm-hmm. And now I want to know what the fuck happens when they get back inside.
Back in.
Yeah. Like at this point, I would be like, okay, I got to watch these last 7 now.
And you didn't even get as dramatic a scene as like we got in the very first episode.
It's not dramatic, it's sad.
Sorry, sad, excuse me.
It's the saddest scene there is.
I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, don't do that.
No one's daughter kind of visually implied that her family might move to America in this episode.
It wasn't that. It was their lack of connection. And the fact that she didn't get fried chicken. She got a steak.
Which
is sad.
She got a steak and tteokbokki. I think that's how you say it.
Tteokbokki, okay.
And what I'm thinking is why not add some fried chicken in there too?
Just throw it in there. Big casserole.
Exactly.
So, I actually think this was one of the stronger episodes, having seen all 9. Do you guys think so?
I think I liked it a lot. I'm seeing like, would I put this in the top half of the episode?
I would. I confidently would.
I probably would, but not
it's
in
fair
like
not to.
top couple.
It's fair not to.
But
yeah,
it'd be right in the middle.
I think some of the game ones got a little bit.
It is.
I think some of the game ones didn't connect with me as well as like just the setup being done well, like it was. Obviously, it can't be the best episode because it's there. Its purpose is to set up what's to come, the climactic moments. So you can't be like that's the best episode, but it really, in the way it stood out from the others, it had a job to do and it did it really well.
It's also like as necessary as any of the episodes because you do need to know this stuff about everyone involved.
It had a risk of being like perhaps maybe losing some interest though, because they went away from the part that people were probably most drawn to, and I felt like it actually made it more intriguing. So again, it's like it's more that it had something it had to do and it really accomplished it is why I liked it so much.
I think what I would say is what drew me to this show, or what I liked most about this show, was the tension. And unfortunately, there really wasn't any tension in that episode, as compared to certainly others. So that's why it's not.
The atmosphere kind of had to do it.
Exactly.
Like it
serves a purpose.
It was all kind of the idea behind how much how much their situations had grown to that point. Yeah, it's imagined in that situation. It's not like right in your face like it is in some of the other ones. It's a little more subtle. Like I said, I can understand not saying it's one of the better ones. Since it stands out so much to me as being so different, I just really appreciate it for what it is.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah. Having to cut it off at the 2 here, and I know it's hard for us to do since we have the context of the other 7, but thoughts from this point where you felt about the show, if you can remember, like, what your opinion would be if we hadn't gone further.
Well, I gotta say, even after 2 episodes, I, like you, Spencer, at this point, I was in, and I did watch, I think, 2 more after this one.
Yeah, you went through 4 really quick.
Yeah, and everything about it that I mean, spoiler alert here for the bonus episode, but I do really like this season of this show, and a lot of the things I liked about it overall stand after just the 2 episodes. I like a lot of the commentary that there is to be had in this show about capitalism and about human nature. I think the acting is very solid. The visuals are really good.
Visuals are pretty outstanding, honestly.
They really are. A lot of the plotting and stuff is clever at the very least. And a lot of the more visceral elements of the show are offset by the fact that you do find yourself being entertained, whether it be via tension from your own couch or whatever, or by something being funny, watching the games, just as the rich people do. They are produced really well to be entertaining to watch and to draw out a lot of emotion, much the way a sporting event would be or something like that. And that, I think, is another strength of the show, is there can be a 55-minute brutal episode that does just float on right by because it's super tense and every scene's worth watching.
I think this show, where it succeeded, and maybe this will lend credence to this being one of, if not the most important episodes, the second one, is it did at least give you a reason to care about these characters. Because if it was just nameless, shapeless people, you wouldn't care. It wouldn't have the gravitas that it has.
That's always one of my biggest complaints with shows, when there is like a lack of character depth. Which argument there is that sometimes, shows don't really need that. They're not trying for that. But if you want to have the characters matter, you're right. An episode like this is necessary.
And after episode 1, we weren't necessarily like rooting for Gi-hun.
Nah, I didn't really know much.
Now, okay, we get it. We understand. And we learn even more about his backstory as we go on. But at this point, it's like, okay, I get it. I understand. I'm invested.
Yeah. And there was already hope at this point that Gi-hun was not going to be a sleazeball like he was in the first episode.
Right.
You were thinking it. You see a lot more, which he's like totally different by the end. But you see enough evidence to be like, oh, I think you can get a sense that they're going to write him a certain way where he grows throughout the show. It was kind of telegraphed at this point.
Yeah, we really get the emotional stakes established on this episode. And like Van said, like that, oh man, it is so necessary because to your point, Spencer, after 1 episode, you watched it and didn't come back to it until now. Do you think a big part of why the second one hooked you in was the fact that as more of a character development guy, that needed to be done?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's not that I didn't enjoy the first episode. It was just that it was easy for me to put aside. I figured I would watch it at some point. I was just, these are a bunch of people. I didn't really remember any of their names when I came back to it months later or anything about them. But you know that by the end of the second one. And they didn't necessarily do an outstanding job with any of the characters, but they did well enough in the second one to where you can see that foundation is laid. And that's important. It would have been harder for me had they not established that. So, yeah, it was. I mean, I didn't expect it to be anything close to as silly and light as most of the stuff we do, but I guess I didn't think it would necessarily be as twisted and disturbed as it did turn out to be.
There are very upsetting moments in this season.
Very much so. Since we switched the order up and you were following now, Van, you have the burden that Brian did all this time, where after I make my very serious selection, we all cry a little bit. You have to lead us in a different direction. Are you prepared to do that?
I think that you guys know me. You know that I am one who values and cherishes seriousness. And I don't like humor or fun or whimsy at all. And I just unhooked my headset, so I'm going to blather for a minute.
As a show of how much you hate whimsy. If there's anything about you, I know you're always saying, like, you guys, this podcast is informational only. Right. Making jokes.
I had a couple of things to deal with here. First and foremost, we like to look at what we have done historically, as in the last couple of episodes. So prior to Squid Game, which is a very heavy topic, we did Holmes and Yo-Yo.
Another really heavy
Another very heavy topic about robot police officers.
Technology, lots of things involved in that.
From the 70s, so era specific. This is, of course, Squid Game from 2020. It's the most recent thing we've done. Prior to that, we did Bones, which is the 2000s. I thought maybe
Bones actually spanned about 4 decades.
400 years is what Bones ran. I decided I wanted to head to the 90s. We haven't done that in a bit.
Love them. We love them.
That's where we grew up in.
And I thought I wanted scientific. I wanted historical.
I wanted Bill Nye the Science Guy?
You've figured it out. That would be the worst thing to cover.
How would we even do it?
That would be the worst. No, I have instead decided that I want to head to the 90s only to peer into the future and return to Babylon 5.
Wow. This is a bizarre choice.
What even is Babylon 5?
Isn't it supposed to be actually good?
I don't know.
It's just sci-fi, right?
It's science. Yeah, it's stupid science fiction, I think. I don't know anything about the show. I didn't look up anything about the show.
Have we done sci-fi?
Hell yeah.
Holmes and Yo-Yo.
Right?
This is exciting.
Hercules.
It's
Steven
new
Universe.
Yeah, okay, maybe a little bit.
But yeah, we've touched on it, but this is explicitly sci-fi.
Right.
I don't know anything about it.
That's
it's
all
a space
I know
station.
about it.
That's all I know.
I don't know.
Space 90s.
What I guess
think I'm
it is.
confusing it with Battlestar Galactica in my head
there's
right
a lot
now.
of them. Because then there's also another one that's
Battlestar
like that. 5. There you go. No, this one, I think it's a space station traveling somewhere.
Okay.
And it's colonized by people.
Are there
they're
cool
boring.
aliens? I bet there are.
I'm sure there are. But I have the 2 episodes here for you.
Let's hear those.
So we're going to do season 1, episode 14, TKO, which stands for Total Knockout, by the way.
What's RKO stand for?
Randy Knockout.
Okay, thank you.
In TKO, season 1, episode 14 of Babylon 5, a disgraced boxer comes to Babylon 5 to compete in the Muay Thai, an alien fighting match. Meanwhile, an old friend visits Ivanova so that she can mourn the loss of her father. Heavy.
Okay.
I'm into this. I want to see alien boxing.
We'll also cover season 4, episode 6. Again, I like to cover different seasons just to see what's happening. We don't have that option with Squid Game. It's only 1 year, and I think we made the right choice doing the first 2 episodes. This one, however, season 4, episode 6, Into the Fire. Sheridan has managed to get the Vorlons and the Shadows into one sector where they are not attacking each other directly. He and Delwyn lead a fleet into the sector where the source of the conflict is finally revealed. This is the end of the Shadow War.
Okay. I mean, I think this is going to be fun.
So I guess we've already covered it, but you guys don't know shit about Babylon?
Nothing.
I clearly don't either.
That's exciting, though. That's good. I mean, I maybe I can be an expert on it by the time we do this. I'll try to watch all of them, just like we did with Squid Game.
We'll watch all 10 seasons or whatever. I think it's only like 6. No, so what happened is Katie, when I was figuring out shows to do, well, let me back up. The first thing that happened when I was figuring out what show to do is I found a show that I think would be brilliant. And then I realized that show only has like 13 total episodes across 4 years, and they're all 2 hours long. So I'm like, I don't want to do that. So instead I was like, what should I do? And Katie said, what about that show about Mormons in space? That's how she talks. Which
little known fact
is about Battlestar Galactica. But at the time we're like, oh, Babylon 5. So then we just chose that.
Okay. Well, I like this. I like the almost happenstance by which this occurred.
Mm-hmm. And I know it's 90s. I'm sure the sci-fi, or not the sci-fi, but I'm sure the CGI, I guess
I bet there's some
bad.
Cool looking alien masks and stuff.
aliens, yeah. So we'll see how it goes. I'm excited. Babylon 5.
Too. Yeah, this is going to be great.
2 weeks.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just low-hanging fruit right
You're
there.
being real fancy with your words here.
I had no choice. That was on a platter. Well, I think we've covered it all. You guys have more secrets to tell this time? Last time's not that exciting, so I need something a little more risque here.
One time when I was a kid in like 4th or 3rd grade, something like that, we would do this thing where if you were good, you got these tokens. And at the end of the year, we would do like a raffle and you could use your tokens to buy stuff. Here's the thing, I wasn't very good. So I didn't have any tokens. I couldn't buy anything. My friend Summer bought these cat salt and pepper shakers. And I was like, I want those fucking salt and pepper shakers. So I took them out of her bag and I hid them. And everybody got in trouble because they knew that someone stole the salt and pepper shakers. But I hid them well enough. No one was caught. And I had them for all of my life.
Why did you want the salt and pepper shakers that badly?
Because they were pretty cool. No, I don't remember anything about them. I just really wanted those salt and pepper shakers. Flash forward like 15 years, and I went to get a haircut, and I just went to some random place, and Summer was there, and I hadn't seen her in years, so I was like, you know what, I'm going to tip you a lot. And she's like, why? And I said, because I stole your salt and pepper shakers when we were in like 3rd grade. And she's like, who gives a shit? And she's like, no, she didn't remember
What if
at all.
she'd been just enraged?
Stab me with the scissors. Yeah, so that's my secret.
Well, I did something similar. This won't be a secret because you were there for it, Brian, but I don't really know what the project was. There was some group of students who had to make flour sack babies. And
I do remember
that
this.
was their project, and I don't know why. I do have a destructive streak. I destroyed someone's flower baby, and kind of more or less somebody else got blamed for it, and I let them be blamed for it. Eventually, it did come out that it was me that did it, and I apologized. It all was fine, but it was a big deal for a little bit, and I totally let somebody else take the fall for it.
How did you destroy it?
I don't remember. I think I just stabbed it.
Just in a rage.
I think it was just
Fury.
leaking baby flour out of its baby belly.
That's too bad.
When I was at Horace Mann Elementary School.
Oh, and by the way, I'm at the number 3 French_in. We tell our Twitter handles with our secrets here, guys.
At Manly Van Lee, salt and pepper shaker thief.
Go ahead, Brian, with your secret and your Twitter handle, as we do here.
At Loud Guitar Brian here. When I was in 1st grade, we had at Horace Mann Elementary School, we had an elementary school library, but we also had a shelf of books you could check out in the 1st grade classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a bunch of little baseball player books that kind of gave you little short bios of baseball players. And I read all of them. I returned all of them, but I was out of baseball books. And that led me to I don't know, I seem to like baseball. Would I like football? I'm like 6 or however old the person is. So I get this book that's like history of the Super Bowl off that shelf. And it's just got like little kid-friendly history of each Super Bowl that had happened at this point, which is only like 5 because of how old I am. I took it home. A few days pass, and my 1st grade teacher asks me at one point, Brian, do you know where that book is? And I was a very goody two-shoes kid.
Don't say kid. I was a very goody two-shoes person until the age of 32. No, I'm kidding.
Almost. And I didn't know where the book was. I had actually lost it somehow or another.
Oh, okay.
So I told her I'd bring it back the next day. I put it off a couple more times, whatever, and then she just eventually just never asked. And this is kind of like your situation, Van, where it comes back later, although this time not with another person. But I mean, probably a couple years later, I did find this history of the Super Bowl, which is just this little yellow paperback book. It wasn't even of monetary value, but kind of wish I still had it.
That'd be pretty cool to look at.
Yeah, so accidental thief of history of the Super Bowl in 1st grade.
Happens. It's understandable.
I like how our stories are malicious, and Brian's is like, I accidentally did something that I felt bad about.
I think you guys know all of my malicious things.
I didn't necessarily kill the flower baby out of malice. I couldn't tell you what I was thinking. It might have been some kind of game I was playing in my head. I don't know.
It's a Squid Game.
If you want more of our secrets, you can subscribe to our bonus content at patreon.com/Bootu Inc. We say all kinds of shit on there, and it's even weirder than this. So give that a look sometime.
Yeah, and you'll get to hear the final thoughts on Squid Game, where we talk the entire series.
Absolutely. And you can also find us online at boobtubeboys.com. We have we do a general Twitter feed as well, just BoobTube Boys. We're on Instagram, lots of other places. If you could think of it, we're there. So look us up, listen to us, love us, and talk to us, interact with us. We really appreciate all of you guys listening to us. And we hope that you're excited for some, what the fuck is that show we're doing next? Babylon 5.
Babylon 5.
Yeah, some sci-fi next week.
Babylon 5.